Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Now, let me read from the 6th chapter. We had done verse number 14 last time. 14 and 15. We had done 15 last time. So verse number 15 and then 16 is nātyaśhnatastu yogosti na chaikāntam anaśhnataḥ na chāti-svapna-śhīlasya jāgrato naiva chārjuna. Yoga is not attained by one who eats too much or who eats nothing at all, nor by him who sleeps too much or who keeps awake too much, O Arjuna. So, in the last verse, we talked about the deepest meditation in the verse number 15 and the ultimate reality which is attained, Shanting Nirvana Paramam. And from there, Sri Krishna goes straight to food, diet. Jiddu Krishnamurti used to say, from the sublime to the ridiculous. Now, no, it's not ridiculous, it's practical. Swami Vivekananda used to say, I know where the shoe pinches. Unfortunately, in spite of all our high philosophy, in spite of all our subtle thinking, we are still embodied creatures. We are creatures of flesh and blood. It's no use forgetting that. Somebody told me, Swami Pavitranandaji used to say, do not abuse a horse you cannot dismount from. So the horse is the body. You can't yet dismount, no matter how much you say, I am the witness, I'm not affected by whatever happens to the body. There's a limit to beyond which, if it's pushed, that philosophy doesn't work too well. At least in our case. We are not yet like Sri Ramakrishna, who can say, yes, the cancer, it hurts, but yes, I'm in great bliss. That's also, I can honestly say that. So until that time, for our spiritual practices, there are certain physical aspects which we have to take care of. Very important. They can make or break. They can make the difference between success and failure. So here, the question of food is taken up, and Sri Krishna says, too much eating, meditation is not possible, and too much starving yourself, dieting, fasting, again, meditation is not possible. You sleep also should be regulated, and couch potato, meditation is not possible. And a person who's a workaholic, doesn't get enough sleep, meditation is not possible. You often see people trying to meditate, immediately fall asleep. I've seen that. At one time, one after another, several companies in India, corporates, invited me to give talks on meditation. So I have seen that corporate circle also in India. So I would notice there would be a demand for guided meditation, and inevitably several people would fall asleep. One reason is we do not know how tired we are. Many people in this society, they don't know how tired we are. You get used to it, and the body takes a lot of abuse. So we don't know how tired we have become. So any amount of, a little bit of relaxation, a little bit of calmness, the mind takes it as permission to fall asleep, to catch up on much needed sleep. That's all right. Recently, I heard a talk, or I saw somewhere, see how we employ and appropriate all these techniques for our own economic needs. What I mean is, I saw somebody with this slogan, meditation is the new caffeine. This is what America does to meditation. Meditation is the new caffeine. And this person who was giving the talk, very smart, very well spoken, said that, see, what we get from caffeine, from coffee, is that boost, that energy. And they were giving the neuroscience of it also. Some kind of neurochemical which tells the brain and warns us that we are tired, we need sleep. What caffeine, it seems it does is, it blocks those neurochemicals. They don't allow those neurochemicals to connect with the brain synapses. So we don't know that we are tired. So we feel we can go on. But of course, there's a price to be paid afterwards. And then the speaker said that meditation can do the same thing for you without the side effects. So meditation is the new caffeine. And the lady who was introducing the speaker said, I'm so glad. I always thought that meditation should become one of our productivity tools. But just the idea, the productivity tool, everything has to be a part of the productivity tools. It can help, but that's not the purpose of meditation, productivity tool. One of these corporate circles I was invited to speak on in India, I gave a talk about spirituality, about devotion, meditation, service. And then the HR manager came in after the talk. He was too busy to sit and listen to the talk. He introduced me and then he disappeared. And after the talk was over, he came back and he said, well, now the Swami has inspired all of us. I'm sure we can all reach our targets. I thought, oh no, the whole point of it is lost. The whole thing is you must give a talk which will which will enable everybody to be more productive and they will reach their targets. That's the only thing. Bottom line is the only thing we are concerned about. Not productivity tools. It can help. See, that's the thing. It can help and it does help in your work life, in your personal life. I think there are also a lot of studies to show how it reduces stress, even boosts immunity. So in this context, I quote, I mean, it's apocryphal probably, or it's just a story, but I have heard this, that Maharshi Mahesh Yogi, when he started teaching transcendental meditation here in the West, and then it became very popular. You do this, it will fight against aging, you will have less wrinkles, your immune system will be boosted, you will be more resistant to disease, you can manage stress, you can work hard longer hours, all of these things. And people flocked to him. So the story goes that when he went back on one of his early trips, he was here in USA and he went back on his trips to India and he met some other monks there. He was a monk of one of the orders of Shankara. So the other monk said, what is all this that you're teaching there? That is not the purpose of meditation. And it seems he said that I give them what they want in the hope that one day they will want what I want to give them. So I'm giving them what they want. I don't want to get old. I want to have more resistance to disease. I want to look young and be flexible. And I want to be peaceful in the midst of a lot of hard work and tension. So yes, those benefits will come. But meditation is not just the new caffeine. The purpose of meditation is enlightenment, God realization. And that requires certain certain things you have to be careful about. One is food. And Sri Krishna here says, you can see that it's just a general principle. He hasn't fixed your diet, your calorie intake for you. Again, not relevant. I was very sick once, about 25 years ago. And I was a young novice. I was put in the hospital. And then I lost weight. I was skinny to begin with. And on top of that, I lost 10 more kilos. So I was looking like a skeleton. And the Swami in charge of the hospital said, call the dietitian. We have to fatten this up. And next bed, there was a Swami who was very obese, suffering from heart disease. And then the dietitian came and fixed the diet for me and for him. And then the obese Swami whispered to me, I was a very young novice. He said, be careful. They're going to make me like you and you like me. So, and I've never seen such a diet because I was not feeling like eating. So little bits of food, and I was eating 10 times a day. There were like 10 or 12 meals a day, little bits of food. And obviously what happened was I immediately threw up. And then it was reported again to the Swami that the novice isn't eating. He was not eating now. We tried to make him eat. Now he has thrown up. So the Swami came charging. He was a very tough Swami. He said, show me your diet. I'm like, why did you throw up? Show me your diet. I showed him the diet. You have to eat 10 times a day, or 10 or 12 times. And he looked at the diet and immediately he tore it into pieces. Is this a man or an animal? You can't stuff him like this. He'll eat whatever he likes. And then he stormed out again. Yes. So notice that just the principle has been given. There's no diet chart which has been fixed here. It's just that do not eat too much and do not eat too little. Don't starve yourself. So Shankaracharya, in his commentary, he has actually quoted from the Vedas a couple of very nice quotes which I'll share with you. One quote from the Vedas and one a popular saying, or I think from the Ayurvedic texts. From the Shatabhata Brahmana, he quotes, this is from Shankara's commentary, and he's quoting, Yadu hava atma sammitam annam tadavati tanna hinasti yad bhuyo hinasti tad yat kaniyo na tadavati. Simple statement. What it says is, those who take a balanced diet that protects the body, that does not damage the body. Those who exceed the balanced diet, that damages the body. Those who eat less than the balanced diet, that does not protect. Pretty simple, common sense, and very good sense, actually. And the popular quote, I've heard this many times, and so it's pretty ancient because Shankaracharya is quoting it 1400 years ago, and he's quoting it. So this is, I'm sure it is from an Ayurvedic text. Ardham ashanasya samvyanjanasya tritiyam udakasya tu vayo sancharanartham tu chatutham avasheshayet. So 1/4 of the stomach should be filled up with your food, including all sorts of condiments or whatever else you're adding to it. All of that should be half of it, half of the stomach. And then the 3rd quarter should be with water, and the 4th quarter should remain empty for the movement of air. So you divide your capacity into 4 parts, and half of it, 2 quarters with food, 1 quarter with water, and the 4th one should leave it empty. One Swami put it this way, that of course it's for monks. Whatever you'd like to eat, eat a little less than that, a simple rule. And the quality of food which you would want, eat a slightly like a lower quality than that, not higher. If you're used to certain kind of food, a little less. One monk, he told me that the rule they had made in their ashram, the monastery was there, and attached to that nearby there was a like a dorm for children coming from poor families. And the rule made by the head monk was the food in the ashram should be of lower quality than the food given to the children in the dorm. So the principle being that you should not be eating better than the children there, you as monks. So these are little small rules, and they are very helpful. And then eating too much, eating too little. I think spiritual seekers have this kind of obsession about food sometimes. They do, some of them. One of the books that I read last year was the very famous Simone Weil's Waiting for God. Yes. So this French philosopher, mystic, she died very young, starved herself to death, basically. So she was very mystical, extraordinary. If you read that book, it's very inspiring. She was in France just before the Second World War. And then she escaped finally to England during the war, again, escaped from the Nazis. Now her sympathy for others made her stop eating. That my countrymen in France during the occupation, they are not able to get good food. I will not eat more than what they're getting, or I'll eat less than that. This thing, of course, her not eating predated the Second World War. She always had this feeling she would always eat less and less. If you see the picture, skinny. And that's a common thing often among spiritual seekers. Sometimes it comes from self-denial. Again, not relevant, but one thing which touched me was she writes about one of her dreams. He had a dream about God. And the oft recurring dream for her would be, God is feeding me. You see, I can't eat. So the whole dream would be like, God is somebody who's feeding me. So that was very touching. She died of starvation. She wouldn't eat. I've known so many monks like that. When I was a novice, I remember one of the young monks, young novices, very austere. At first, it sounds so inspiring. This young man, he would, um, he would serve all of us food. So you can imagine, it's hot and humid, and physical work is really saps you. He would carry these heavy buckets of dal and rice and all, and serve all the monks sitting with the others. And when the system is, when we have finished eating, those who are serving, they will sit down to eat. And the monks who run the kitchen itself, is a huge kitchen for hundreds of monks and novices. So the monks who are actually the staff of the kitchen, they will serve those who had served others. And finally, they serve themselves, or the others before leaving they serve. But this young man, he would serve everybody, along with the team of other, those whose duty was to serve food to others. And I have done it myself. It really is exhausting. You'll be soaking wet by the time it's finished. And then he would serve the next batch of people, his own friends who had served others. They would sit down to eat, he would serve them. And then the monks who ran the kitchen, he would serve them. By the time all of us would have retired for our customary afternoon siesta, he would come back, not eating again. He wouldn't eat. And you won't believe this, but I've seen it. It actually happened. He would come back. He would actually collect leaves and grass from the fields and clean it and boil it and eat that. And that is obviously far too much, but I've seen it go to that extent. Sleep. This particular novice, he was, to minimize sleep, he would meditate late in the night, and he would get up very early in the morning. And in the meantime, the 3-4 hours of sleep that he got, he elevated, sort of inclined his bed so that it wouldn't be a comfortable bed. He had put bricks on one side of the bed, and so it was sort of inclined like this. How we found out was, one day there was an almighty crash in the dead of the night, and he had slipped off the bed. Anyway, finally, he was made to climb down from all of that extreme thing. Because he was sincere, he was saved. Other people, either they snap because of overdoing such things, or they just give up in frustration after some time. But this boy was very sincere, because the ashram he had come from, a very senior monk who was the head of that ashram, who had seen him from his early days as a novice. When he came to the main monastery, that senior Swami called the principal of our monastic training center and told him, please take care of this boy I'm sending to you. He is a simple village boy, but he is very sincere. So I know the Swamis who were above us were very protective about this young man. Ultimately, he became balanced. He became more to what Gita says: not too much eating, not too little eating, not too little sleeping, or not too much sleeping. So yoga is not possible. What happens is, too much eating or too little eating, it increases tamas in the body-mind system. Too little sleep or too much sleep again induces tamas in the body-mind system. So it won't allow meditation. All right. Next. In the same vein, he continues, 17th verse. Yuktāhāra-vihārasya, yukta-cheṣhṭasya karmasu, yukta-svapnāvabodhasya, yogo bhavati duḥkha-hā. He who is moderate in food and movements, in his engagement in actions, and in sleep and wakefulness, attains to yoga, which destroys misery. So food, sleep, and then vihara actually literally means taking a walk, but it means exercise and recreation. So exercise and recreation, and cheshta here means work. So 4 elements have been mentioned here. balance in food, balance in sleep, balance in your exercise and recreation, and balanced work. So these four elements, if they are there in your life, yogo bhavati duḥkha-hā, then only your practice of meditation will help you to overcome suffering. Then only it will work. Otherwise, it won't work. I remember when I joined the order 25 years ago in the monastery where I was in Deoghar, we had a Swami who was the head of the center at that time, a wonderful Swami. I mean, not only me, all of us who joined under his care, we are so grateful that at the beginning of monastic life, we found such a good example. And if one thing you could, one word you could describe him was balance. It's pretty austere balance, but balance. Balance, routine. Every day, without fail, he would get up earlier than all of us. And without fail, he would go and sit ramrod straight in the meditation hall before us. And he would leave after us. He would have his food exactly with everybody else in the ashram. In the same time, sit with there's small kids, school teachers, young novices, other monks, and he would come and sit with us, the food exactly at the same time, exactly the same food we ate. He had a precise time for studies. So he would teach us novices 1 hour every day in the morning in the roof of he would sit on the floor of the roof in the monks' quarters and on mats and study. And after that, he would study for 1 more hour himself. But always precisely, not more, not less. I mean, his routine, he could write it down and you could, they say for Kant, you could correct your watch by his routine. The great German philosopher Immanuel Kant. So people would correct their watches by when he took a walk in his hometown of Königsberg. In the afternoon, he went for a walk at 3 o'clock, I think, or something like that. And they would correct their watches. So he was so precise about his routine. There's a joke about, actually a real story. I've told you earlier. So he would go up to the church and can come back to his home. And at the church, he would see the clock tower there, big tower at the clock. Old towns, old cities had it. I have seen in India, there are cities which still have these clock towers. And Kant would take out his pocket watch and look at the clock tower and wait for the clock to strike. And then he would correct his watch and he would walk back. One day he asked the priest, the pastor in the church, "Father, how do you set your time?" The father said, by looking at your walk. So they were correcting time by looking at each other. Yes. So the Swami was like that. Exact time for going to office, exact time for evening walk, every day, rain or sunshine, exact time for evening prayer, meditation. Only once in the several years I saw him, one day only I saw in the evening, there was a guest, another senior monk who loved to chat. So I could see our Swami becoming visibly uncomfortable. Time for prayer came and went, and this other Swami was chatting, but because he was an eminent monk come from our main monastery, our Swami had to entertain him. And later he told, just that one day, later he told us novices that this is not good for you young people to see that your Swami is sitting in the office in the evening instead of meditating. That he did it only once. But balance, extraordinary routine. And we thought that was normal. It's only when another Swami visited from another ashram, and he, in his delight, he told us young novices, "Your Swami is extraordinary. He does not have 1 minute to spare." That means his routine is so well set. It may seem mechanical, but it's not. Just the things that you want to do in your life, why not automate them? If I have to decide every day in the morning when I will get up, it's a new thing for me to decide. One day very early, one day very late. That's an awful way of leading your life. So the power of deciding what to do should be used for higher things, not what to eat or what to wear. You can see monks don't have to decide what to wear. It's all set for them. What to eat, whatever is given. When to get up, exactly as the monastery routine suggests. That gives you a structure, and it's a balanced structure. Notice, it's not an extreme structure. It's a very austere balance, but it's a balanced structure. Not very extreme, not in the sense that he's meditating all day long, not in the sense that he's working all day long. Rather, I consider it much more difficult and much more efficacious to lead this kind of a balanced life for decades and decades, instead of suddenly in a burst, 7 days, meditate 16 hours a day, and then the 8th day have a nervous breakdown. That's no good. So this is balance. The philosopher Arjuna Chakravarti said, I was delighted once I went to one of your monasteries, our monasteries. He was saying that just today he called me, he was saying that the Swami who is in charge of the monastery, an elderly Swami, once in the evening I saw him come perspiring profusely. And so in the Bhakti Shastras, one of the characteristics of a person going into an ecstasy is that the hair stands on the end and you perspire. And so I asked the Swami, so are you coming down from an ecstasy of devotion? He said, no, I'm coming down after playing ping pong, the table tennis. And he said, I really appreciated that. That is, at this age also the Swami takes this exercise. So balanced life, exercise, and work. All the monks. Swami Vivekananda, when he spoke about the 4 yogas, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, he made it a point to add, quite apart from your meditation, study, and devotional practices, it is important that everybody should take part in the work of the ashram. So work is very good for mental health, and of course for spiritual health. Then the next verse number 18. Yada viniyatam chittam atmanyevāvatiṣṭhate nispriha sarvakamebhyo yukta ityuchyate tada. What is the result of this kind of a balanced life? When you practice meditation, he says, when the mind well controlled remains fixed in the self alone, and one is free from craving for all enjoyments, then one is said to have attained yoga. Yada viniyatam chittam. The mind controlled in this way, with a balanced life, very important, food balanced, sleep balanced, exercise and play, and work. All of these in a balanced proportion when you sit for meditation. If that allows you to sit for even half an hour in the morning and half an hour in the evening, that's also good enough. Your mind will become concentrated. So he says, in this way, chittam atmanyevāvatiṣṭhate. Your mind settles on the self, pure consciousness. So I'm not the body, I'm not the mind itself, and I am the witness consciousness. Stay with that awareness. That is the mind settling on the self. Of course, those who are doing deity meditation, japa, mantra japa, and visualization of the deity, there it would mean your mind settles on the deity. And he says, nispriya sarva kamebhya, not hankering up after satisfaction of multiple desires. The satisfaction of multiple desires, what the desire does is called raga, attraction for things. The word in Hindi, they say, the sadhus, ye man ko bhagata hai. You want to sit still. Bhagata means it makes you run around. So you want to sit still. And what desire does is it prompts you to run around. Run around means not physically. One might be sitting still, but the mind is running around. If you pull back the mind, at the same time there are desires, what will happen is the mind will, if you forcefully not think about the things which you want to think about, and forcefully try to keep the mind, I am the witness consciousness, or on the deity, Krishna or Shiva, mind will refuse to cooperate. So the mind which is stuffed with hankerings or negativities, guilt, complexes, unhappiness, it will refuse to cooperate in meditation. Either you will feel sleepy or you'll feel distracted, something. Those are the sullenness of the mind. Like a little child who doesn't want to study, and you take away his Xbox and make him do mathematics or something. So you can see the expression on the face of the kid. So that's the expression the mind gives you when you force the mind to do what it doesn't want to do. The nispriya sarvakamabhya, the only way to fix that is to give up, to stop this hankering. Spriya, thirst. Nispriya, free of thirst. Thirst for what? Sarvakamabhya, all sorts of desires. Desires of the senses, desires for appreciation, desires for material wealth and success, all of those desires. You are not being prompted by them. Yukta ityuchyate tada. Then alone you are said to be truly settled. You're truly settled in yoga. Very nice verses coming up next. Yatha dipo nivatastho ningate sopama smrita yogino yata-cheṣhṭasya yunjato yogamatmanaha. Even as a lamp placed in a place free from any breeze does not flicker, this is the simile for a yogi of controlled mind, practicing concentration on the self. So the unflickering, the flame of a lamp, this is the simile used in many places to denote meditation, to show what meditation is like. Notice, it's not that the flame has gone out. The flame is there. That means the mind is working. But it's so fine-tuned, so pure that it's like an unflickering flame. The flame is there, but there's no wind to make the flame flicker. So the mind is tuned. It is not disturbed by anything external. It's not disturbed by internal raga dvesha, likes and dislikes and complexes and negativities or strong desires. Those things are not there. External disturbances, internal disturbances not there, then the mind focuses. What do you have to do? The 3 steps, the final steps of Patanjali Yoga: dharana, dhyana, samadhi. So dharana, you focus. It could be the deity meditation. You're focusing on the form. You have imagined the form of, visualize the form of Shiva. By the way, what is the difference between visualizing and imagining? It's one thing to understand. In deity meditation, you are told that you think of God in the form of Krishna or Shiva or Durga. And you're imagining it. But what is this difference between visualization and imagination? In Sanskrit, the words are bhavana and kalpana. Bhavana is meditation, and kalpana is imagination. So what's the difference between me trying to visualize the form of Shiva, the blue-colored deity with the moon on the forehead and the locks of hair, and sitting with a tiger skin around his waist and sitting in yoga posture in the snowy Himalayas and in samadhi? That's a visualization. Suppose now we visualize Spider-Man or Superman. What's the difference? This is also imagination, that's also imagination. No. One Kashmiri Shaiva philosopher makes clear the difference. He says, these meditation techniques suggested, the bhavana suggested in various scriptures. What is this bhavana? There is an existing reality which you are unable to catch right now. And these are hints from people who have realized. They are ways, hints, suggestions to your mind. If you think about it, visualize in this way, one day it will become a reality. You will see it. It's already an existing reality. You just don't see it now. When the mind is capable enough, it will be able to see that reality, that divinity. Whereas kalpana, imagination, is the creation, is the creativity of an artist. I can put together many ideas in my mind and create a character like Spider-Man. No matter how much you meditate on Spider-Man, you're not going to see Spider-Man because Spider-Man doesn't exist, a fictional character. So Shiva or Krishna or whatever, the forms of God or the forms of the avatar, they are not fictional characters. They are actual spiritual realities which will manifest at one time. So this is the difference. You visualize bhavana and keep your mind there. That is dharana, focusing. When you do that, the mind will flicker. So you go through 4 phases. For phase 1, I keep my mind on the deity and the mantra. I repeat Om Namah Shivaya, and here is the deity, the form of Shiva, which I have been taught to visualize. Then the next thing will come is distraction. Something will come up, either externally or deep from inside. So internally something will come up. And my third will be mind wandering. The mind will start following that distraction. And the fourth will be the recognition that my mind has wandered from the form of Shiva and the mantra Om Namah Shivaya, and I bring it back. So these are the four. It will go and it will keep happening. You're not supposed to do it. Now I'm going to meditate. Now let me be distracted and enter the second stage. No, that happens. You're not supposed to be distracted, but it happens. As you go through it and bring it back again and again, the mind goes into dhyana, meditation, actual meditation. So meditation is the seventh limb of 8 limbs. Ashtanga yoga, the seventh limb is meditation. Again, I must have mentioned this earlier. I noticed in Daniel Goleman's book, Focus, there he mentions some neuroscience studies that the 4 stages in meditation, which every meditation manual more or less points out, it's a common thing you can observe. Neuroscience has now confirmed that there are different circuits in the brain which are different neural pathways which light up in fMRI imaging, and the meditator reports, yes, at that time my mind wandered. At that time I recognized it. At that time I made the effort to pull it back. And they see different nearby parts of the brain lighting up. So that was quite amazing that these 4 stages, which are mentioned again and again, even in the Gita they are mentioned, they actually correspond to something that's happening in the brain. Anyway, so this is the first stage, dharana or focus. Again, when I'm saying first stage, there are 3 stages of meditation: dharana, dhyana, samadhi. But this is actually the 5th of the 8 limbs of yoga. Yama and niyama, 1 and 2, the moral practices. Asana, number 3, sitting posture. Then pranayama, that is breathing, a control of the breath, that is number 4. 5th is pratyahara, withdrawal. And the sixth one is dharana, the one which I was talking about, focusing. And that focusing is intermittent because it's disturbed. When the disturbance goes away, then it is dhyana. The disturbance may come, but it will be very little, and mind will flow like they say oil being poured from one vessel to another. So like continuous flow, not discrete, but continuous flow. And that leads to absorption. If you can hold on to that dhyana, and that is also effort. Dharana is effort, dhyana is effort, and samadhi also. It will be achieved, but it will just before that there will be a subtle kind of effort. Very subtle focus is necessary to deepen dhyana into samadhi, meditation into samadhi. And that samadhi is also a step, by the way, a limb of the 8 limbs. That samadhi is called savikalpa samadhi or sampragyata samadhi. The ultimate samadhi, asampragyata or nirvikalpa samadhi, comes after that. So all of these 8 limbs are meant to achieve that nirvikalpa samadhi or asampragyata samadhi. So of these 8, the final or the highest is sampragyata samadhi. All right, what else did I want to say? So in that samadhi, mind is also active. Active means it's still, but it's not fallen asleep. It's not blank. It is totally absorbed in the object of meditation. It could be the deity you're visualizing, or it could be the self. I am the witness self, and the mind becomes steady in that feeling, or in that what can I call it? In that reality, mind becomes steady in that, does not flicker anymore, but the mind is steady, it's awake, it doesn't fallen asleep. So that is the example which is given. Yatha dipo nivatastu. In a windless place, when you place a lamp and the flame does not flicker, such is the example given about the yogi who has fixed his mind on the self. So here the deity meditation is not being talked about. It's straightforward Vedantic meditation. All right. This is, however, just the surface. So these things you have to hear from the teachers, how deep it goes. I'll make a few points here. A very perceptive comment was made by a non-dualist master living in India in the 1950s or 60s. Atmananda, Krishna Menon. So, in fact, recently I was reading the reminiscences of of Joseph Campbell. He wrote this book, Bakshish and Brahman, about his tours in India. In the 1950s, he went with Swami Nikhilananda from the East Side Center. They went in a group to visit India. And Joseph Campbell, of course, had many other interests. He was interested in art and history and all. So he went with Swami Nikhilanandaji and he toured over India. And he has given his reminiscences, his experiences. Interesting, Nehruvian India, 1950s, early 1950s. I think he got to meet Nehru also, probably. Now, in that, there's a whole chapter where he actually goes and meets Atmananda Krishna Menon in Kerala. And Joseph Campbell actually held Atmananda Krishna Menon in great regard. Okay, that's just the background. One comment, which he did not give to Joseph Campbell, I read it elsewhere. The comment is this, very perceptive. He says, when the mind by whatsoever means is turned towards the self, capital S, the mind loses the characteristics of mind and remains as the self. This is called samadhi. Beautifully said. It clarifies a lot of problems. The mind by whatsoever means, it's turned towards the self, Atman, pure consciousness, witness consciousness. It loses the characteristics of being a mind and it remains as the self itself. That is called samadhi. It's a state of the mind, but in that state of the mind, it is very much unmind-like. It remains as the self. Now see what problem it solves. That thing that by whatever means, one of the means, very popular, the well-known means of doing this is Patanjali Yoga, the Ashtanga Yoga. By that, you can calm the mind down to the 8 limbs of meditation, reach sampragyata samadhi, and finally, hopefully, a sampragyata samadhi, when the mind becomes free of thoughts, chitta vritti nirodha, and remains shining in the light of the self. Swami Vivekananda compares it to a lake without any ripples. The water of the lake is very clear, crystal clear water. First condition, mind must be pure. Second condition, the water of the lake must be free of ripples. When the water is free of ripples and waves and it is crystal clear, then you can see through the water to the bottom of the lake. Exactly like that, when the mind is pure and still and turned towards the self and still, then the self is clear that I am this witness consciousness. That is the third sutra in the Yoga Sutra. Tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam. The witness consciousness is appreciated in its real nature at that time in samadhi. But that's one way only. This is the controversy. I often get myself into trouble. There are people who say on both sides. One group says that you are not emphasizing samadhi enough. Another group says, why are you talking about samadhi? In pure Advaita Vedanta is not necessary. What Advaita Vedanta does is, it does actually the same thing. It turns the mind towards the self, not by the Ashtanga Yoga, but by Vedantic inquiry. Drig Drishya Viveka. If you practice it phenomenologically, it means you feel it and you go step by step, it can do that. Avasthatraya, the method of the seer and the seen, the method of the 3 states of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, the method of the 5 layers of the human personality, Panchakosha Viveka. In these multiple methodologies, all it does is what Krishna Menon is saying, Atmananda is saying. It is one more way of turning the mind towards the self, till it loses at one point it will lose the characteristics of being a mind. A self alone shines. It's appreciated as it is. That's samadhi. But that samadhi achieved through inquiry, not through the yogic method of controlling your breath, sitting in lotus posture, whatever. Sri Ramakrishna says that bhakti teo samadhi hai, kumbhak hai, and samadhi, by in deep devotion, in intense devotion to God, there comes times, not just once, number of times you will have the mind remains absorbed in the Ishta Devata out of sheer love and surrender to the Ishta Devata, and samadhi is achieved. By sheer love, by sheer bhakti, samadhi can be achieved, devotion. By self-inquiry, this samadhi can be achieved. By yogic practices, of course, this samadhi can be achieved. So this is, but what is the nature of this samadhi? It is the mind remaining in its real nature as the self. The real nature of the mind is actually the self. The pure mind and the self are not different. What, after all, this is clear in Advaita Vedanta. The self is all that there is. So in some sense, the mind also must be the self. So where do we clearly perceive it? Now, Advaita Vedanta goes further than this, but we will see that later. So that's the first point I want to make, the deeper point. It is not just a deep kind of concentration or absorption. The samadhi which is being spoken about here with the example of the unflickering light. The unflickering light is not the unflickering mind. The real meaning of the unflickering light is the light of consciousness, is the Atman. The only thing that is really ultimately unflickering is the Atman, which neither increases nor decreases. There is no possibility of its flickering. Like sunlight. Light and light alone. No question of increasing, decreasing, flickering, nothing. So exactly like that, the Atman is that. And when the mind is calmed and you realize I'm not the body and mind, I'm the light streaming into this body, mind, and to the body from the self, from I, me, myself, the real self, then the mind tends to become still. Stop there. There's no difference between the mind and the real self. The mind is no longer an obstruction to the real self. The real self is the real unflickering lamp, the unflickering flame. So that's what there's a deeper meaning. When we first approach it, the first pass I took at this verse, we felt that it is the mind they're talking about in the Gita. The mind becomes like an unflickering lamp. When it flickers, it is mind. When it doesn't flicker, it is the Atman. So when it flickers and it's the mind, is the Atman not there? Atman is still there. It's obscured. We don't see it as it is. Now I'm speaking in yogic language. The non-dualists will smile, give a superior smile at this point. But anyway, it's important to appreciate the yogic aspect of it also. It's practical. At other times, the mind, the flickering of the mind obscures the unflickering light of Atman. In fact, that's why sometimes this becomes a differentiating factor between Tibetan Buddhism and Advaita and yoga and Advaita Vedanta, because we speak very clearly about mind and Atma in Vedanta and yoga also, in Sankhya also. Mind and Atma, two separate things. You are not the body, not the mind. You are this Atman. Whereas the Tibetan Buddhist would say pure mind or the nature of the mind. They are talking about the same thing. They use terms like clear light of the void. What is the void? The still mind. What is the clear light streaming through the void? The Atman itself, pure consciousness. So this Atma Jyoti, light of the Atman, it is peace itself because it never flickers. The mind can approximate it in samadhi, but other times it starts flickering. But the Atma Jyoti never flickers. So it neither comes nor goes, neither increases nor decreases. It is peace itself. And that peace is real joy, not the joy experienced in the mind. The pleasure in the mind that we keep running across, we're running after, that increases and decreases. And that comes and goes, and usually goes up very fast. So the real joy is in the light of the Atman, that unflickering consciousness. Why is a simile used? Like the unflickering lamp of unflickering flame of the lamp, yatha deepo nivatasta. It's a simile. Why is it used? The reason being, what they're trying to talk about, the light of the Atman, or the Atman which is light, it cannot be talked about. You cannot talk about it directly. And the moment you're talking about it, you try to indicate it, it's already within the realm of the mind working. That which is beyond the mind cannot be referred to by language also. Only way you can use things like similes, metaphors, or paradoxical language, things like that. That's why the simile is used, because it's beyond language. How do I do that? Expel these 7 things from your mind. The 5 inputs of the senses. The mind should not think about form, things which we see. Don't think about anything that can be seen. Don't think about anything that can be heard, shabda. And also the other inputs, taste, smell, touch. No form, no sound, no touch, no taste, no smell. 5. Then expel all thoughts of any kind of misery, suffering, pain of yourself, of others, anything, physical, emotional, intellectual, social, political, all thoughts of pain, all thoughts of happiness. Whatever pulls the mind that I want to achieve these things, everything, worldly and spiritual happiness, you expel. Sukha and dukkha. The 5 inputs of the senses, happiness and pain, sukha and dukkha. Expel these from the mind. Stay with the consciousness which is there in that void, in the absence of all of these. Further, deeper. This consciousness, this light which is there in the absence, already the mind is absolutely peaceful, not thinking of any object, quiet, deeply stable, silent and quiet. Now, the consciousness which shines there, also make sure it is not a stream. So, it's a very subtle point which is being made. This distinguishes it from the Vijnanavada, the Buddhist Vijnanavada, which talks about the self as a stream of consciousness. Stream means consciousness flash 1, flash 2, flash 3, flash 4, flash 5. When that is happening, these flashes of awareness, I'm aware, but there's a little flickering there. That flickering, what you are aware of is the reflected consciousness, chidabhasa, which is flickering in the Vijnanamaya kosha. Your vrittis are still there. The movements of the mind are still there. And each of them carries or reflects consciousness. That reflected consciousness in the series of vrittis, the flickerings of the mind. So you'll have flickerings of consciousness. If you see any sense of continuation, any sense of sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, one after another, pure consciousness, pure consciousness, pure consciousness, it's not pure consciousness. That which is watching that is pure consciousness. So it's a very subtle point which is being made. Otherwise, but it has to be made. That distinguishes you, the pure consciousness, from the reflected consciousness. So what have we got? 5 elements: form, sound, smell, taste, touch. No thought about anything connected to that. This will eliminate the material world from your mind. And then all sorts of subtle forms, ideas, feelings, emotions are there, but they can all be basically boiled down to pleasure and pain. Reject that. Then you will get a stillness. Make it absolutely quiet and still. You know that there is awareness. Make sure that awareness is not a sequence. The sequence will be there because the mind is still active and it keeps on reflecting pure consciousness, your real nature. Then in that ultimate stillness, that's it. That's what you are. You can't use language to talk about it. What are you supposed to do then? 4 things: laya, vikshepa, kashaya, rasa, swada. These are the obstacles to meditation. So don't let the mind fall asleep. When you make all these efforts, whether in a deity meditation or you're trying to settle on the pure consciousness, at one point, the mind will fall asleep. Falling asleep is not meditation. Or it may not fall asleep. It may just be quiet. No, being quiet is also not meditation. I have to keep the mind, turn it and keep it on the witness consciousness or on the deity I'm meditating on. That is what I'm supposed to be doing, not being quiet and peaceful, sitting quietly. No. Or falling asleep. No. Then the next thing is vikshepa. Vikshepa is running around. After some time, the mind starts chattering. It's the habit of the mind to chatter. Chatter about what? Everything except what you want it to focus on. You'll chatter about the world, about people, about your problems, about what is to be done after meditation. All sorts of things will keep coming up in the mind. Don't allow it to chatter. Your mind is supposed to focus for this next 30 minutes on the object of meditation or on the self itself. And so bring it back. Make the effort to stop the chattering. Again, I must thank Professor Arindam Chakravarti. He shared a gem today from his guru, the great Swami Sarvapriyananda. So gem is very beautiful. Chattering of the mind. He said, his guru told him, one of the instructions was, the mind has the nature of chattering, of speech. It talks. Now you may go away into solitude and you stop talking, but the mind will go on talking, chattering away. Or people in solitude develop the habit of talking to themselves. I've seen that, mumbling things to themselves. Suppose now you go further, you are in solitude, now you take the vow of silence. I will not speak. You will not speak, the mind will speak internally. Externally, you are not speaking. It's like a pressure cooker. The moment you remove the vow of silence, you will speak even more. Make up for all the lost opportunities. So that is not the way. His guru told him, then what is the way to make the mind stop speaking? The guru said, it is a dictum that poison removes poison. Poison cuts, bish ke kate. So poison removes poison. And that's true. All our vaccines, our antidotes, they depend on what they're trying to remove. They take a little bit of that and then use it. So poison removes poison. And what do? If the mind is chattering, you must replace chatter with chatter. Chatter with God. You want to remove worldly chatter? Then fill it moment to moment, talk to God. Internally, an internal dialogue. No harm there. It's all for the good. Whatever you have to say, say to God. Feel the presence of God, your Ishta Devata, your chosen ideal, and you speak mentally. You convey your worries, your anxieties, your hopes, your prayers for devotion and concentration, good health, whatever it is, whatever is coming to your mind, let the mind chatter, but only to God. So you will find the mind calms down. You chatter about the world, and with the world, the mind will not come down. It will become more manic. But start talking to God, you'll see the mind slowly calms down. And pretty fast, actually. So when the mind is running around or chattering, you need to calm down the mind. One way is, of course, talk to God. I thought I'll share this with you. A very beautiful insight. Then, Rasaswada, finding peace and joy and happiness well before any spiritual development. That can happen also. And then in Vedanta, in the last class we saw, 2 classes back, when you're talking about the obstacles to meditation, you have mentioned it. Yeah, a few classes back. Oh, there's somebody whose mic is on, I think. And then the third one is Kashaya, which is a kind of stillness of the mind. Mind refuses to move forward. It's not sleepy. It's not distracted. It's not in a peaceful, nice state. Sometimes they say there are complexes in the mind, problems in the mind, which disturb you so much that you can't meditate and you just remain in a stunned state sometimes. Anyway, all of that you have to overcome and bring the mind. The whole point is, in every case, bring the mind back to the object of meditation. When you do that, at one time, this stillness will come. And in that stillness, it will be very clear. You can think about it after you come out of that meditation, but in that stillness, it will be very clear that you are this unlimited consciousness. This is the goal of yoga, Sankhya, Vedanta, and I would venture to say Tibetan Buddhism also. This is the goal. And you've got it, you are there. Then na chalayet. That means, and then the instruction is, when you are there, don't do anything more. But then whatever you do, you will throw the mind off, it will start moving the mind. And the mind moving is no longer with the self as it is supposed to be. So this is it. So is this the goal of all spirituality? Advaita Vedanta says not at all. Not at all. There Advaita Vedanta goes further. It says this is samadhi. It's a very precious, wonderful thing to have. After this, you will have no more doubt about the claims of spirituality. Your problems also will be at a very deep existential level. The problems will be at an end. You know your problems, whatever the problems were at the worldly level, they're still there, but you are no longer, you know that they are not really problems. You are safe. At that level, that consciousness being always there, that is always there. That's your real nature. You are immortal, beyond suffering. You are there. But Advaita Vedanta says, not only in that samadhi, it's exactly the same thing now also. Otherwise, Swami, why are you monks in India? Why are you running hospitals, schools? Here's a funny story. Most revered President Maharaj, Swami Sarvapriyananda, used to tell this story. When he was a much younger monk, now he's the president of our order. Once he was going in the train, and a gentleman, seemed to be a villager, but quite well-to-do, elderly gentleman, saw him and said, "So you're a Mahatma, a monk. Can you see my hand and tell me my future?" So that's their idea of a monk. A monk should have all these characteristics, can give you some medicine to cure your disease, can tell you what's going to happen in your future, and can bless you so that your problems are removed and your desires are satisfied. All of which, by the way, are true, so that you don't lose faith in monks. But that's not the point of being a monk. Anyway, can you see my hand and tell me my future? And then the Swami said, "No, I don't know that. I don't know palmistry." And this actually, the humor is much more in the original rustic Hindi. The gentleman said, "Hath nahi dekhta, kaisa Mahatma hai? You don't know palmistry. What kind of Mahatma, what kind of monk are you? What do you do?" And rather defensively, the Swami is very gentle. He said, "Oh, well, we run a school for kids from underprivileged families." And the man snapped at him, "Run a school? You're a monk. What kind of a monk are you?" In Hindi, "Sakul chalata hai, kaisa Mahatma hai?" School, they can't even pronounce what a school. He says, "Sakul chalata hai, kaisa? What kind of a Mahatma are you?" So that's the idea of Mahatma. Mahatma, the monk, should be immersed in deep samadhi. What we talked about just now, that people will say, "Yeah, that about sounds right. Your mind should be like unflickering lamp and you should sit in from lotus posture." And that's it. The moment you shift out of lotus posture, you're not a good monk anymore. Why are you running a school and giving money and, giving money to poor people, treating sick people? It's not the job of a monk. You should be in samadhi. Advaita Vedanta says, even that samadhi is a lower thing compared to your real nature, which is Brahman, which is shining most clearly in samadhi, which is also everything else that you see, with, as Sri Ramakrishna said, with eyes closed and with eyes open. With eyes closed, there is God, and with eyes open, there is no God. What kind of God is that? Sri Ramakrishna said, "Chok bujle tini achen, chok khulle tini nahi." By closing your eyes, God is there. When you open your eyes, God is not there. It is a very high Advaitic, the sort of the final conclusion. It's literally whatever we do, we are always immersed in that limitless consciousness. Literally here now. You are in the ocean of Brahman right now. As much as the monk who is in Nirvikalpa Samadhi right now, in your hospital, in your driving in your car, cooking something, talking with a person, reading a book. Yes, we don't see it. That's because we are in ignorance. If you see it, you will see it everywhere. So that is the highest Advaitic realization. The immanent divine shining in every condition, effortlessly so. You don't have to put in all that enormous effort to reach that pinnacle of samadhi which we talked about. It's very subtle and difficult and unstable also. You will slip away from it again. It's of course very valuable, very, very valuable. But Advaita Vedanta is talking about something higher. All right. Good. Let's quickly look at a couple of questions before we bring this to an end. The quote, "I give people," Abhijit says, "I give people what they want in the hope, yes," and so on, is ascribed to Shirdi Sai Baba. Yes, I've heard that. Right. So I said it's, I'm not sure who said it. Sangeeta said this eating rule is from the yoga text, Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Yeah, it's a sister science of Ayurveda. Krishan Roy said, Sri Atmananda's definition sounds very close to what Sringeri Shankaracharya said. When a sword hits a stone, the sword itself gets broken. Correct. It's exactly the same thing. But that's, again, a simile. And you have to catch what he's pointing at, the Sringeri Shankaracharya. But I think Atmananda has said it so simply and directly. When the mind turned towards the self by whatsoever means, loses the characteristics of being a mind. Now he sounds like Gaudapada, Amani Bhava, no mind. Mind becomes then no mind. The self alone remains. That is called Samadhi. The whatsoever means is very important. That it settles all quarrels, whether you do it by bhakti or by yogic meditation or by Vedantic inquiry. But of course, after all of that, after this Samadhi also, Vedanta claims superiority because he said we go beyond that. That's not the end. Prabir Basu, holy company has a tremendous calming effect on the mind. How does that happen? I guess because the person we are meeting is immersed in God, so that has an effect. In fact, one of the characteristics of truly holy company, a truly good sadhu or an advanced spiritual seeker is you will see some effect on the mind of people around. Everybody will feel calmer or inward, quieter. Shravani says, many enlightened persons are said to die willingly, mostly in a state of meditation samadhi. How is it understood in Vedanta context? Do the descended identify with both mind or body? It's just the body. Yes, we come across such instances many, many times. I've myself seen this again and again and again. So it is not uncommon. But again, it's not necessary. The person who's enlightened and realized that I am Brahman, it's very clear. Exact manner of death, it may depend a lot on prarabdha karma. Advanced spiritual seekers, we know, yes, they often get, for example, they get a premonition of death. We have seen this happen many times. They die thinking about or meditating on God. That also we have seen. More than this, what will I say? Then, no words to thank you, Maharaj, to give us good wisdom, keeping our minds in peace during the pandemic. Sri Ramakrishna is always protecting us. That is true. Sudhirji says, isn't it that the mind is also an object? So how does it focus towards a subject, self in meditation? So how does it focus? You see all these descriptions which are given by quietening itself. First, in Vedanta, what do? You fill the mind with the nature of the self, that I am not the body, not the mind. What are you doing? You're filling these ideas into the mind itself. And then talk about what that reality is. That reality is awareness, not a thing. It is not beginning, it is no birth, no death. It is immortal. It is pure. It's not contaminated with thoughts and feelings and emotions, not affected by papa and punya, merit and demerit. So all these ideas from Vedanta texts you get. Where are these ideas now? You have surcharged your mind with that. That's turning the mind towards the self. The mind can never objectify the self. You're right. The self objectifies the mind. Whatever is objectified, whatever is in the mind, whatever the mind thinks of is not the self, precisely. But the mind which is turned towards the self by first of all turning away from the world. Notice the instructions. Do not think of forms. Anything that can be seen, don't think about it. Anything that can be heard, don't think about it. Anything that can be tasted, smelled, touched, don't think about it. The material reality drops away. Then anything that can be thought, felt, remembered, stop that. One good way of dropping that is to stop thinking about sukha dukkha, pleasure and pain. Anything connected which is pleasant, which is unpleasant, stop that. Now the mind has stopped doing what it can do. And yet all the awareness, understanding of what you are, the pure awareness is there in the mind. In this silence, the pure awareness becomes distinct. Not that the mind makes it distinct. Pure awareness is distinct by itself. The veil which the mind was generating has for the time being slipped away. And then in the pure awareness, by the pure awareness is recognized. Sri Ramakrishna uses the language bodhe bodh kara, being aware of awareness, or being enlightened in the light itself. It's not the mind which gives you that enlightenment. It is just the enlightenment is the shining forth of the self itself. In the Gaudapada Karika, Shankaracharya says, of course, there he talks about the method of Vedantic inquiry. By that method, you come to it. And then what does the Jnana Yogi see at that point? He says it's a mass of non-dual consciousness, revealed by that non-dual consciousness, not by the mind. The mind is there, it's just still. The great Abhinavagupta, a Kashmiri Shaiva philosopher and saint, he says, notice that all these methods, they are not necessary, because none of the methods, or they are necessary, but notice, before we talk about the methods of meditation, notice one thing. None of these methods can reveal Shiva, just as a pot cannot illumine the sun. Now, he has given you, for those who understand Vedanta, he has given you a very powerful pointer to what you are. Pot cannot reveal the sun. It's impossible. It is the sun which shines on the pot and reveals it. The pot does not illumine itself, and it cannot illumine the sun. It's absolutely impossible. Now, what is he talking about? The pot is the mind, using whatever meditation technique and all of that. And you are the sun. So keep the pot and sun analogy or simile again, and then apply it to yourself. You know what the mind is. You are aware of it internally. So if the mind is like a pot, what is it that it can't illumine, but which is shining on it continuously? You stop with that, you will reach the self. You will realize the mind will be plunged into samadhi. But for that to happen, all these conditions, to keep the mind quiet in meditation. Sri Ram says, thankful for educating and enlightening us with your clear, precise teachings. Thanks for this wonderful opportunity. All right. Yes, we will go on in the next session in the fall. Onion and garlic. Should students of Vedanta take onion and garlic? Avoid if you can. If you cannot, there's no problem. This is part of sattvic ahara. One thing you notice about food, when Krishna mentions this, and later he will give more details, but nowhere he enters into any kind of specific details. He gives general principles: vegetarian food, non-vegetarian food, onion or garlic, or these details are provided sometimes by later scriptures, but the Upanishads, Gita, they never make specific recommendations. Alpana says, tendency is to stop breathing because that disturbs the deep silence. This breathing gets very low, yet what is the way out? You're right. In samadhi, in that moment, breath stops. I've actually seen this. Not in deep samadhi, that I have not seen, but what you might call mini samadhis. I have seen monks, they go into it and they come out of it in a shudder. And it's not difficult to attain that moment, a little samadhi. So one Tibetan master, he gave a very nice recommendation. He said, this kind of samadhi which you're talking about in the Gita or Yoga Sutras, this prolonged deep absorption, it is the work of a lifetime. It's hard work at a very subtle level. But before that, well before that, what we can aspire for are those little moments of stillness and insight repeated many times. Many times, little samadhi. One time big samadhi later on, but many times little samadhi is possible. He says, otherwise, he says the problem with this prolonged samadhi is at our level, is that in attempting to stay with that insight, first of all, you have to get that insight. For that, all of Vedantic Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, Shravana and Manana are necessary. In the attempt to stay with that insight, what happens is that insight quickly becomes contaminated with thoughts. For us, for ordinary people, somewhere the mind will start flickering, a little bit of thought will come into it. Better to abandon that insight, take that shudder and come out of it, and then dive again. If you can't hold your breath for so long, don't turn blue in the face. Come up, take a deep breath, relax a little, and then start again. Here is the object. I'm seeing it with the eyes. Here are the eyes. I'm aware of it with the mind. Here is the mind. I'm aware of it with. Stay there. All right. There are so many comments and questions. Yes, there will be Katha Upanishad classes, but that will be online. And these classes also will resume. We'll see as much as possible we can keep it online so that people who are at other places apart, far away from New York, they can attend live. And yeah, in the worst cases, of course, everything will be recorded and uploaded. All right. Please take care and stay safe. Let me end with the Shanti. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Rama Krishnarpanamastu.